welcome everybody to our continuation of our exploration of ChatGPT and generative AI. And so Rand, this is his second here, but it's actually his third of trying to inform the school of how ChatGPT and interactive AI generative AI works. So we're pleased to have you here. Hopefully he's gonna hopefully involve us interactively with ChatGPT today, and we'll see how it all goes. And we have questions. And hello everybody on Zoom, and off we go. Thank you, Rand, for joining us.
Thank you. Well, thanks, Joe, again, for hosting this in the fine way he does. We get lots of great help. Sue, Coulter, anyway, everybody who's made this possible. And I should say, every one of them gave me the ideas I was going to talk about. I came in here, I was just stumped. So thank you all for, preparing a talk for me. That made no sense. Anyway, can you all hear me okay? Do I need a mic or anything?
I think it's all working.
Okay, when the camera's going, we're recording. All right, so yes, this is my, this is part 3 of the never-ending sequence of me talking about ChatGPT, and first time was here, but it was for a college-wide function, and so it was rather introductory about ChatGPT, main points being ChatGPT is not very useful, I think, as a search engine. I think its real strength and ways you can make it more accurate and helpful is taking advantage of its adaptive capability. ChatGPT is what you want it to be. It has certain ways it'll think by default. They're really easy to change. You can make it think any way you want it to think. How do I make it think? Well, I've got this theory, cognitive flexibility theory. It's about complex and ill-structured domains of knowledge, which in many ways are totally different. Yes?
Can I interrupt you? So you said a couple times you can make ChatGPT think. Well, ChatGPT doesn't really think, it responds.
Okay,
right?
And this is great. Interrupt any time because, after giving
I think it's an important clarification.
All right. Does ChatGPT think? Does it think like humans? Well, I was back at the Yale Artificial Intelligence lab a while ago, and we did GoFi, good old-fashioned AI. And we tried in a symbolic representational way to get it to think like people think. It was part of the big start of cognitive science, when in cognitive psychology, AI, linguistics, other fields. ChatGPT is, based on a large language model, GPT-4 these days. It's a transformer model, which means it's very good at processing huge amounts of information to predict what is likely to be the next word. It's got a reinforcement learning model on top to smooth out some of the language. And to what extent our processing is like a neural net parallel distributed processing model. One of the founders of this whole new approach, Jeff Hinton, it came from how we thought humans think, at the neural substrate. I have no idea. Nobody has any real idea. Probably not like the way humans think. But after that transformer model and that reinforcement learning model is applied, you have billions of calculations, billions literally, going on to produce everything that ChatGPT produces, and many, many hidden levels of computation that are inscrutable, that are impenetrable, that the programmers don't know anything about. And what comes out the other end is what you work with, the output. Now, that output is surprising the programmers. I mean, who would not be surprised? How many of you have used ChatGPT? All right. Have you ever been surprised at inferences it's been able to make, conceptual blending, concepts in context, tailored to the context, putting together thinkers who have never been put together before in print anywhere, and it draws inferences about how you would integrate two different theories that come from disparate domains using a metaphorical bridge in the middle. It's amazing that that comes from an algorithm that calculates the probability of the next word. So now to Joe's question, does it think? Does all the things thinking people do? I can get it to think like me. Well, you were at my talk yesterday at EdPsych EdTech. That was all about getting it to think like me, weaving large-scale themes through concepts of modernity. That was a social science talk yesterday. I've been a cognitive psychologist for a long time, and it seems to me that it thinks in the ways you try to get it to. If you don't want to call it thinking, call it collaborating, outputting, whatever it is. I've had a lot of wonderful collaborators over the years. And right now, I don't think it's as good as the best of those, but it's better than the second tier of those collaborators. Is it thinking? Well, it's doing whatever I need to help me to think better. So one big use, and one we'll try to work on together, is to get ChatGPT to help somebody who's trying to reach a more advanced level of understanding of something, get them further, faster, and freer. Freer in the sense that I get ChatGPT to develop output that will have conceptual variability, open concepts that can be tailored to various different contexts. If you're talking about adaptation or stability in an ecosystem, those concepts work differently in different kinds of contexts. A single definition of adaptation is not going to prepare you to use the concept in practice in the real world. So I get it to leave concepts open so they can be tailored to context, so they can be combined and then recombined in different ways in different contexts, because it is a rapidly changing the world, and even the most well-structured of scientific knowledge, once it touches the world of practice, the real world, unconstrained, not the end of the chapter test, well-structured knowledge, predictable, regular, orderly, determinate, codifiable, algorithmic, becomes ill-structured, which is why last time, and if we have time at the end, we'll return to this. I showed a chat that we didn't get enough time to talk to, so we'll pick up right where we left off on that one, about what do we do if we can't stop global warming? Well, we have to adapt, because the environment is going to become a difficult one to live in. And so I set up Carla, the climate scientist, as a persona, a perspective for ChatGPT to adopt, and Gus, the global social scientist, because whatever you need to do to adapt, you also have to, fit the political, economic, psychological, social realities to make it practicable. The reason I had those two perspectives, and then you might remember it was cute, I moderated, and then, they were making each other better as they went along, though it went by too fast to really see, but we'll stop and really read this time. And then I just stopped moderating. I said, you go, keep going like this, make each other better, integrate your ideas across science and social science issues of practicality. And then I jumped in later. The reason I put that in is because cognitive flexibility theory is not for well-structured domains. We've got great ways, a lot of them emanating right from this institute, for dealing with more well-structured knowledge. But when you have complex ill-structuredness, irregular, non-scripted, non-routine, not predictable, a lot of you know complexity science and how stochastic occurrence of different kinds of combinations of variables produce emergent novelty. CFT, cognitive flexibility theory, is for dealing with complex real-world messiness. So you can have adaptive structures, adaptive cognitive structures, those open, freer structures, more flexible structures that make you ready to adapt to changing situations, ready for when you don't have a prepackaged schema, prescription for how to think and act, to build a schema of the moment for this problem or that problem, and the problems are novel. And the world is throwing a lot more novel problems at us. We just lived through that, for example, with COVID. What do I do now? You could know the science perfectly and you still didn't know what was safe early on. Something Joe and I talked a lot about. So you have to have adaptive readiness and then also practice in being flexibly situation adaptive. Skill in adapting to particular problems using that adaptive readiness that you've built up. So I did this social science perspective combined with the climate science perspective to make it into an ill-structured problem. Didn't have a right answer. There are multiple possible solutions. You raising your hand?
No, I'm sorry, I'm exercising my hand.
Ah, okay.
I have to do this periodically.
Sorry, whatever happened to that hand. So anyway, if it was just the climate science, you wouldn't need me as much. You wouldn't need CFT. So what I'm doing is, and in fact, and I'm not going to go into all the theory now, it's a whole other talk. What you do in ill-structured domains is in many ways the opposite of what you do in well-structured domains. Well-structured domains, there's very often the single right answer that can be checked, confirmed, and so on. Ill-structured domain, out in the messy real world and all, there's multiple possible answers, and you have to, evaluate them with value, presuppositions built into it. Well-structured domains are linearly separable, compartmentalizable, decomposable. Real-world situations are often more system-level. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Lots of different opposite stuff. So, all I'm talking about is more complex and ill-structured stuff. ChatGPT is very good for, and I'm going to get to our exercise in a minute, but I just wanted to, I'll share that later actually. Why don't we get going and start playing? I can just see what's open here. All right, you want to do a group participation thing? All of us? All right. There, as I was telling Joe, I just trained up ChatGPT for this this morning, and it hasn't been tried yet, so we're all going to be participating in an experiment here. I told it I was going to tell an advanced biology class, you're the advanced biology class, about a particular topic in ecology, and that I wanted it, I described the learning goals and some questions I want you to be able to get to, and I told it it's going to be the tutor. It's going to not jump right away to the full answers, but just respond to what you say, what you ask, suggestions you make, and inch you along the way to a fuller, more complex understanding. Because again, CFT, I'm interested in things where it's important to master the full complexity. So this is more on the complexity side and less on the messy real world side. I've got some of that later. All right. Back in the 1880s, there was plague-level infestation of Southern California citrus trees with cottony cushion scales. These essentially eat plants, and the entire industry was threatened. Everything they tried didn't work. These scales were killing all the orchards. Didn't know where these scales came from, because they were, mainly found in Australia. Somebody must have brought them in, and whatever gets imported or whatever. So they went to Australia, and they brought back these Vidalia beetles, which are ultra efficient predators of these scales. They had brought back maybe 200-300 of them, not a huge amount. See if that would work. So they put the couple hundred Vidalia beetles in a tree, covered it with netting, and very quickly there were no scales left. You may think tigers and lions are scary, but at that lower lower scale of things, smaller scale of things, insects, as you probably know, are as efficient killers as there are Vidalia beetles. Every time they hit a scale, the scale's dead. And so they took the netting off, and the beetles spread. Now there were a lot more of them, because they get a lot of calories from the scales, and that helps them to reproduce pretty quickly. In 26 days, you get a new generation. So it worked, and as you know, the Southern California citrus industry has thrived. So here's the question for you. In this process, why is it, first of all, that those scales are still around? They don't become extinct with such efficient predators. And here's a thought for you that you can maybe work out if you start to build up to the complex process that's going on here. Many interacting factors. What's the spatial distribution of the scales in California after these beetles were introduced And how does that spatial distribution compare to the spatial distribution of the scales in Australia? Similar, different? What you need to know is in Australia, the trees are pretty far apart. In the, fruit orchard, they're packed pretty close together. So after the situation stabilizes, what are the comparative spatial distributions of the scales live in those trees? All right. Now, what are your thoughts? First of all, how does all this work? Why are the scales not destroyed? You need ChatGPT.
Oh, Jonathan might know. What is it, Jonathan? What's the answer? You're a biologist.
What? Repeat the question again?
How come those scales that are, destroyed so efficiently by the beetles still around?
Probably because they evolved. Perhaps, I would say honestly, I would say Red Queen hypothesis, honestly. Where it's basically like everything has to evolve and it keeps on an evolution rate where everything's running in place. So for example, it's like, okay, they adapted this adaptation to deal with the beetles, and they try another adaptation, and they can still go well, but they also go back to the same place. So it's a constant cycle. So that's my hypothesis, is Red Queen hypothesis.
So the scales have to have a faster generation rate than the beetles? The beetles are 26 days, so the scales have to reproduce faster than the beetles, right?
Or
Not
at least
reproduce,
evolve at a
adapt.
rate. Doesn't necessarily have to reproduce faster, but they have to evolve adaptations at a similar rate, which doesn't necessarily always mean reproductive rates have to be the same.
That's not the main explanation, though. Over time, I'm talking about a shorter time scale, like over a year, 2 years, 3 years. You're not going to get as much adaptation. But you know what? ChatGPT is going to be in charge of this. So which of these biocontrols?
So how long does it take for these populations to reach stasis? You say a year or two and they reach stasis and it just holds?
No.
It oscillates.
It's
It's a predator-prey oscillation. So the predators eat all the prey and then the predator population crashes and then they didn't get all the prey and then the prey reproduce and now we got predators coming back. And it's
That's a more
predator-prey oscillation.
immediate answer. I mean, your answer is very good. Okay, so here's what I told ChatGPT. I have a class of students who need to learn about the interaction of dahlia beetles and cottony cushion scales. They will ask questions. Can you only respond to that part of the complex process that they are asking about? I want their questions to lead to a gradual filling in of the blanks. Absolutely, I can provide information in response to specific questions, or in this case, suggestions, about the interaction between the beetles and the scales. This method will encourage your students, all of you, thanks for being in my class, or simulating a class, to think critically and learn through inquiry, enabling them to construct knowledge step by step. Feel free to start. So, talk's a good game.
It always does.
Always does. No, it doesn't always. I mean, I push it pretty hard, and I get it to the point where it pushes back, and it says it can't do it, or you're wrong, Rand, and all that kind of stuff. No, I mean, it's my friend most of the time because I'm right most of the time, but when I'm wrong. When you respond, don't search the web. Oh, here's a new thing, by the way. ChatGPT is not only not your grandmother's ChatGPT, it's not even your ChatGPT from a week ago. It's now trained up to April 2023 instead of last training in November 2021. It does images, it does all kinds of things. But What it does is it also accesses the web using Bing to find more up-to-date stuff than its training set. Okay, not quite as important now that it's been trained 5 months ago. However, it does that by default, and it really slows things down. Really slows things down. How do you get it not to be slowed down? The way you do everything with ChatGPT. You just talk to it like you would talk to anybody else. So I said, when you respond, don't search the web. Fast answers are preferred. Also assume this is an advanced undergraduate biology course where mastering complexity of problems is important for them to accomplish. So there's a mastery goal, not superficial introductory understanding. But I got it, otherwise everything goes much slower. Understood, I'll provide, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to tell you the background knowledge the class has been provided with and the ultimate goals of their collaborative inquiry learning. Perfect, go ahead and share that. This will help me tailor the responses to fit the context of the class's current understanding and educational targets. Okay, and then this is what I just told you. All right, and then I forgot to say that this was going to be on the screen, so that's why I didn't show this yet, because some of the answers come up. Why scales aren't wiped out by the Beatles? As was suggested, behavioral adaptations are part of it. These are various different reasons, but what I want us to focus on, the aspect of all of this, is the predator-prey population dynamics that you were talking about. Even suggests some ways to do this quantitatively with Walker-Volterra equations. Again, this is just your starting point, all right? You're in charge, you're the one doing the learning, this is your intelligent assistant. It's getting you further up the learning curve faster. For some of you, I assume, this is some suggestions that might be helpful in getting up that learning curve further, faster. The other question, the pattern of spacing of scales after the Beatles were introduced, don't look at that yet. So let's type in some of your stuff. What was that? The Red Queen hypothesis, right? Or the Red Queen model that you were suggesting? I think that's
Jonathan. Was it the
Red Queen?
Red Queen hypothesis, yeah.
Okay. Does the Red Queen hypothesis have something to do with this? And I haven't tried this yet, so it'll be interesting to see. I'm going to show you the answer. Don't look at the stuff about space. Yes, the Red Queen hypothesis can indeed be relevant to this ecological scenario. The hypothesis gets its name from a line in Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass, where the Red Queen says to Alice, it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. So, as we will see, and was suggested by, I forgot your name. Mark. So suggested by Mark, this is a perpetual process. It's hide and seek, starting over and over again. One cycle out, they're found, they come down, they come back. In a sense, a lot of running around to, not keep in the same place so much as start the cycle over again. In evolutionary biology, the Red Queen hypothesis suggests that organisms must constantly adapt, evolve, and proliferate not merely to gain reproductive advantage, but also to simply survive while fitting is ever evolving. In the context of the Beatles and the scales, as could explain why the scales are not completely wiped out, coevolutionary arms race, environmental changes, predator, satiation is what Joe was getting at, the relative speeds of reproduction. Of course, if this was an advanced undergraduate biology course, we wouldn't have Joe and Mark and Red Queen guy, what's your name? Jonathan, you know, getting us up the curve so fast, but that's good because it's only an hour talk. All right. So, you know, it's not so much what we're looking at the process for shorter time scales. One student suggested, and how would you phrase this, Mark, your suggestion?
I was just asking, was it sort of, I would consider a standard predator-prey in a relationship where,
A standard.
Similar to like the lynx. You have the lynx and the wolves in
yeah,
Canada.
I mean, this happens when there's predators and prey. It happens with squirrels eating walnuts.
Right, it suggested that above though, I already gave that response.
Yeah,
It was one of the responses above.
but you weren't supposed to see that.
I understand. I had not seen it at the time.
I forgot to tell it I was going to have this on a screen.
That's right.
Ah,
All right, first of all,
Right.
you know, whatever it responds with, we're going to question the word standard you
Sure.
used.
I
Because,
would-
you know, if you're talking about, you know, large cats,
Right.
you know, they're very, very inefficient killers. They've got all their prey all around them, and, you know, they'll, you know, euthanize some of the older prey, so to speak. But the relationship is a different one,
Sure.
although it does stabilize it, and it goes through a cycle in its own way, but not a cycle like this one. So we're learning about this particular
The specific
predator prey kind of thing, but that's a good start. On shorter time scales, standard predator-prey relationships and their associated models are indeed very relevant. Classic models like the Vaca Volterra describe oscillating. Oscillating was a word that was used. Populations of predators and prey. According to these models, the population of predators lags behind the population of prey. Prey is abundant, et cetera, In the context, okay, so first it gives some of the standard stuff, those first 4 bullets. Now in the context of the Bedelia beetles and the cottony cushion scales. Initial impact. When Bedelia beetles were first introduced, they found an abundance of scales and experienced a population boom as a result of the plentiful food supply. Beetles consume the scales, population decreases, 100% kill rate. Any encounter leads to the scale's death, which may not immediately lead to a balanced predator-prey dynamic, but rather a reduction of the prey population. Beetles then have less food, leading to, no, what they actually do is they move on. So this is incorrect. This is incorrect. So, you know, since I'm the teacher, I can say, don't the beetles move on in search of the scales rather than having it's probably both, of course. I phrased that wrong. Yes, that's a critical point in a natural setting. I told you I love it. It's willing to admit when it was wrong. In a natural setting, predators like Bedelia beetles do not simply decline in population. So there's the foraging behavior, metapopulation dynamics. It's an hour talk. I didn't send out my slides from the last one because we're going to return to that, and I'll send it out after we interact with that one. But, you know, you're supposed to actually read this stuff, process it, understand it. You know, if you want to take a second, the fast readers among you, this is all important stuff. You know, if you spent 15, 20 minutes with this, you will be considerably up the complexity learning curve. So it's helping with that, but it's also getting stuff wrong, which it does. As I described at my last two talks, you always want to use this ACE 1, 2, 3 process. Ask your questions, then correct, shape, say I want more of this, less of that, I want you to think more about the variability across situations. Tell it how you want it to, I'm going to put think in quotes here for Joe, because you don't want me to say that it's thinking, how you want it to think. And then the last step, expand, further corrections, and so on. You can use where you've reached by that third one, which will asymptote towards something that's actually starting to look acceptable, not like the first response. And you can use that as a hub to go off for nonlinear learning, because you're learning about things that have multiple facets and at different strands contributing to the explanation. So the strength here is, you know, the world doesn't go in a line, the world isn't organized into chapters, which I always say is my favorite quote when the New York Times and other places have quoted me. They want to know, why do all this difficult stuff? Well, because you're trying to learn to apply your knowledge in the world, and the world doesn't go in a line, isn't organized in chapters, and so on and so forth. So once you reach that third step, you're ready to start tracing the contours of the way this happens in the world, following different conceptual paths. So anyway, this gets you a little further along. It says, in the classroom, discussing these behaviors can help students understand why predator-prey systems rarely result in the complete eradication of the prey species, and how predator is an important factor in the control. Like landscape ecology, spatial distribution. I want to focus more on the specifics of in front of the group. This particular predator-prey relationship, handles and scales, and less on generalizing to standard predator prey relationships. I want mastery of the particulars. Can you suggest other important variables the class should be considering? Okay, so this will all be helpful. Again, you're trying to reach a higher starting point for a more advanced exploration towards mastery of the subject. This gives you lots of things. You can ask it to expand on any of those. You can get more detail on whatever you want, but it's still not helping us get to that spatial distribution question about Australian trees versus the California trees. But as you can see, there's a lot of complexity here. So, for example, climatic and seasonal influences. All right, we talked about a perpetual hide and seek. If you have this beetle scale situation in a place that has seasons, including winter, they're going to relax. They're going to go to, become quiescent. A lot of them are going to die during the winter. Same with the scales. It's going to be a lot of hardship during that winter. What comes about in the spring? They wake up, they're going for scales. Scales have all that spring vegetation. They're reproducing. The game starts over again. Hide and seek. All right? Just to speed up this process since it's getting late. When the beetles find the scales, they kill them all. But it's somewhat of a random process. In those orchards, there'll be some that are left. Not enough to hurt the industry, but that's the answer in part to how they survive. As this starts over, winter, you've got a contributor to the fresh start. So you're on your way to further investigation of further, deeper, more complex aspects of this, because most of these things interact with each other. I could, if we had more time, say, how does number 3 interact with number 5? And it'll give a pretty good answer that can be shaped up. Building a web of understanding, because all these things are interconnected in a complex network, all right? We don't teach networks very well with textbooks or lectures. But we wanted, what are your thoughts on spatial location, spatial distribution? Okay, in Australia, the trees are pretty well spaced, and some fraction of those well-spaced trees have the scales distributed to them. All right. Can you give us a hint on the pattern of spatial location of scales in Australia versus the more densely packed trees in California? See if he knows what a good hint is. Well, it gives a lot of hints. Yeah, all right, so it needs to be trained up more. So far, the most basic answer isn't being provided. I could say, get it to agree with me again about what it's leaving out here. But the answer is the pattern amongst those densely packed trees in which you will find the scales distributed is exactly the same as in Australia, because of the stochastic kind of process of distribution. the likelihood of missing, all the interactions of these factors produce the answer to that question. I wouldn't have thought the distribution of the scales and the very differently distributed tree patterns in Australia would be the same, but it is, and it can be shown by looking at a lot of these things. All right, so one quick illustration. I want to have some time for questions. Let me just ask you, would you rather ask questions or would you rather return to develop further that thing we got to a certain point and are now ready to really have some fun with? The next step I took, by the way, after Gus, the global scientist, interacted with Carla, the climate scientist, social scientist, climate scientist. They went back and forth, and I stopped even moderating because they were improving things. The climate scientist, I'll just describe it to you. It's really fascinating, and I'll send you the chat. The climate scientist was overly influenced by the social scientist. They're talking, and I'm just worried about, so Carla, the climate scientist, is now just saying, yeah, we got to really make sure, people are used to new technologies and stuff like that. And then I said to her, hey, wait a second, you're Carla, the climate scientist. This is overly weighted towards the social science aspect. There are crucial climate science aspects here for water management, I think, was the specific problem we had them going back and forth on. And then it says yes, because knows who's boss. And it started to balance back towards, let's not forget the science here. There's all of a sudden it's got 9 different branches of climate science that is integrating into every one of the possible adaptive, innovative solutions. You're the boss. It's human plus machine. It's a tool to help you. That's how I use it. The thing about advanced learning, it's hard to do in an hour talk, all right? But this is sort of how I do it. As a last thing, so we got 9 minutes left. What is it? Let's see if it even knows the answer. By the way, notice how good it is at keeping track of everything we've been talking about, shorthands and everything to the spatial distribution. This is wrong.
Have you asked it for citations and have it give you false citations that don't exist? I've had that experience also. That's fine.
It does hallucinate sometimes. I don't use it for information. I use it for helping to advance my understanding in interaction with me. I gave a talk at a medical school a little while ago. I've done a lot of biomedical cognition work. We published stuff on common misunderstandings of the ultrastructural basis of congestive heart failure. So, I know why so many physicians and most medical students don't understand heart failure. They think the heart is a big muscle cell, but if you look at individual muscle fiber force production physiology, there's a lot of teaching about the length tension curve. Short lengths, increasing the length increases the tension or force that's produced. Then you have a plateau, and then a descending limb, because at long lengths, the sarcomere arms lose the ability to ratchet onto the myosin filaments, and actin can't, it's basically a disinterdigitation. They don't have slots to ratchet onto, and that's why they lose force at greater lengths. But then people think, for the whole heart, where you have the Frank-Starling function, where end diastolic volume is related to force that's produced as the heart starts to next stage of contracting, has a very similar kind of curve. An ascending limb and then a plateau. And they think, well, hearts fail because they get collective overstretch of muscle fibers. And then you get onto the descending limb. There is no descending limb of the Frank-Starling curves. If you had that much volume, the heart would explode. But they're overgeneralizing from a simpler example. Anyway, so I'm up there and doing all this cardiovascular physiology stuff, and sure enough, it's got the Frank-Starling misconception, and I'm asking it, whether it's, not the case that you're overgeneralizing from the process for individual cells. I say, oh yes, you're right, et cetera, But an interesting thing here. So a lot of those people in the audience had their understanding improved, but by ChatGPT. But and now it's trained up so they can use it with their students without that error. They didn't have to be embarrassed that they didn't know that. These undergraduate biology students who might not have gotten up the learning curve as fast as all of you, they're interacting in private with their friend, ChatGPT, 24/7 available. Help me understand this better. I don't think I'm grasping all the complexities. It's as valuable a use for students as it was for those medical school faculty. We need to get people up the learning curve faster. I haven't gotten to the applications where you actually adapt in problem solving. I can train it to do a cognitive flexibility theory type application. This alternative way of thinking with multiple perspectives, multiple representations, contextual variability and concept use across context, concept combination, and so on. Just covered a little bit of complexity here, but we have a lot of trouble getting people to develop adaptive skill for complex novel problems. Another thing we have trouble with as the world becomes increasingly complex is teaching people how to ask questions. When there isn't a single right answer, like in that adaptation to climate change, you need to learn in part by asking questions. Never had a way to teach that. We have a way now. You all know about the Socratic method? You got Socrates, the teacher, and you got the student, who's the learner. Now we have the possibility for learner as Socrates. Student is the AI program. You're trying to train it up. You're asking questions, you're saying, I want more of this. You are practicing shaping knowledge. We've never been able to test the learning effect of the student, the learner not being in the student mode, but being in the questioning Socrates mode. You learn a lot by asking these questions. I learn more from this process of interaction, back and forth, nonstop, sometimes hours at a time, when it relates to my work and stuff. I learn more from the questioning and response and then further questioning process than I learn from any answers I get from ChatGPT. So anyway, there's lots and lots of new functions that we haven't had for complex learning and knowledge application in unconstrained real-world situations in the past. So do we have time for a question or
I
two?
think you should take a couple questions. Yeah.
Sure.
I don't know if there's any online. There's
Looks like
any
there's-
questions from this group?
Yeah, I'm happy to ask a question.
Mark,
Sure.
ask a question.
If you mentioned the Socratic method, and so that was one of the things. Have you tried actually having it be Socrates? I mean, and push students when prompted with a scientific question where the student has a misconception, instead of just correcting the misconception and saying this, think about this, push the student's misconception. Have a dialogue with the students to the logical contradiction of their misconception. Is it capable of doing that?
absolutely can be done, should be done. You know how you do it? You say, do that. And if it doesn't get it right away and you don't like the way it's doing it, you go through this ACE 1, 2, 3 process. By the time you get to the third response, you'll be so amazed how much better it's doing it. Because, you know, it just wants to be a good tool for you. It's an adaptation to your personalized, customized, tailored needs is its great strength, along with its amazing conversational ability because of the large language model. Its first answers are lousy. People use it too often just for searching, and it's a dynamic, interactive learning partner that you can get, that you can shape to do, for example, what you just suggested. But you might need to go through a few steps to get it there. But it'll catch on. And it's got biases, you know? So yesterday I was doing, I figured everybody would know something about the modern world, so I did an interdisciplinary social science thing about modernity. I'm an Orville Fellow at the London Interdisciplinary School, which was the first new accrediting institution of higher education in England in like 25 years or something, and nobody's learning in disciplines. They're learning, you know, science in the context of social science, like that earlier example, and so on. And so, you know, we're all, you know, well, you know, me mainly, but at the end, other people, you know, we've got questions about what it's saying about this notion of modernity. Oh yeah, so, you know, people are saying, well, what about all the biases and everything? Well, somebody had just asked about the various variables in play, and the dichotomies and the different themes and so on, and wanted to know about some philosophers who might take some of these themes of modernity, fragmentation, unity, constancy and change, all these kind of seemingly contradictory theories, and, you know, somehow put them together. And Hegel comes up, and Nietzsche comes up, and of course they all, that's a good answer to start. But here you have 4 white European males, which of course is, you know, kind of a bias in ChatGPT, in part because it's a bias in our society, and a lot of the writing. So let's get rid of this bias. Simple as that. I said to it, not good enough, it's too biased towards white male Europeans. And then we've got, you know, all kinds of, you know, non-white, non-European, non-male philosophers who are understudied and now can be brought into the discussion at the level they deserve to be, which might be the Hegel level or whatever, because you said you wanted it. It's out there, it'll find anything you want, though it's not frequent enough to, you know, be the first thing that comes up. Well, you say that's not good enough. We want to think differently. And every time I ask it to think differently, it does. Other questions?
Ask it if it thinks.
What's that?
Ask it if it thinks.
Therefore,
It's going to say no. It's going to say, I'm not human.
No, I'm a large language model that predicts text. I know what I am.
I did once
I
already.
am what I am.
They actually gave a really nice explanation.
You know what? Let me just. What do I got?
You want to put it in a new chat, otherwise it's.
Yeah. It doesn't think, it just outputs products of thought,
Yeah.
which is,
I'm just stressing
what
that
you-
because I think it's important for, I think it has a lot of value, but I don't want people to think that it thinks. I don't think it thinks.
or that
At
it
least I don't
thinks
think it
well
thinks.
without your help. Okay. Joe asked a question at my talk yesterday. What's my biggest fear? And after I said, you know, within 2 years, me and Joe are losing our jobs, which was a joke, I said, okay, I've got societal fears, and it's already, you know, I mean, female truckers are suing because some algorithm, you know, excluded them, and, you know, AI cars are killing people, and, you know, the military's already working on deadly weapons guided by smart algorithms. Yeah, I you know, societally, I don't work on. I work on learning, and I work on learning in my complex and ill-structured domains. Okay, they're my biggest fear. And for learning in general for schools, is we're not going to educate people about what this is, what you need to know. It's not a bunch of answers. It's something to help you to think better, to go further, faster, and freer, and here's how you do it, and here's how you don't do it. I mean, we've got a big job ahead to get people at every level of education ready to use ChatGPT. And a lot of people, as I said at the end of the talks, kind of like it, so I'll do it again today, because my sleeves are rolled up again. A lot of people are throwing up their hands and giving up and saying this is too hard, testing, cheating, et cetera, et cetera. Not too hard. There's accommodations that can be made for everything. I can give a whole hour just on new ways of testing, forestall cheating, better tests, all kinds of ways. The cheating problem will go away. We'll just adapt. So instead of throwing up our arms and giving up everybody in this room and online, it's time to roll up our sleeves and get to work. We have a job to do. We're educators, and there are dangers here for students. But, you know, AI literacy can address that, and then these become tools that help them to learn faster, better, at whatever level they're at. I can, you know, get ChatGPT to do Vygotskian zones of proximal development, so it finds out what's just ahead of where you are. And it becomes ultimately customizable for an individual. We've always wanted personalized learning, and it's never worked out well. This is a tool that can be used to make every individual better in the way that that individual needs, meeting them where they are. Okay, let's go get lunch.